How's it going, guys? Public Safety Network here. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that I've actually seen pop up quite a bit in forums like Reddit and other places, and it's going to be topics such as resumes and interviews and kind of how to do well at them and be well prepared when you try to land security jobs. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that, security jobs, they're just, if you have a pulse and a guard card, you're good to go. And, that to some extent that is in fact true, but there are a little higher end security jobs that do expect a lot more of you and that are a little more selective. So a lot of times resumes and how you conduct yourself in interviews is going to be a determining factor in whether you get the job or not. I had one such experience with my job that I actually just landed and just started last week, about 2 weeks in now. And so I'm going to kind of talk about some guiding principles when you're doing things like resumes and interviews. And at the end, we're going to talk about some things you probably don't want to do or avoid doing with both of them. First, we're going to kind of talk about the resume. The resume is obviously kind of a brief synopsis of your work experience and education that you send to recruiters when you're applying for jobs. Some of these are going to be security specific and other ones are going to be just more general and could apply to interviews for jobs in really any industry. Before we get started on that, if you guys haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification icon so you let you know when I release a new video, and also follow me on Facebook and Instagram as well if you guys don't already. So the first thing we're going to talk about really is resumes, and this is going to, again, as I mentioned before, a brief synopsis of work history and education. One of the big things you're obviously want to include is contact information. Make sure that when you send resumes out that your contact information is correct. You don't have to put things like address and stuff like that. I mean, you can put that's going to be in the application most of the time unless it's just a resume based process. But having an up-to-date phone number, maybe a brief summary of your professional experience. On mine, I kind of give 2 or 3 sentences about my experience and future goals and things like that, because it gives the recruiter or whoever's looking at your resume kind of an understanding of what future goals are and kind of a brief synopsis of what experience you bring to the table. Another thing is going to be placement, guys. Every person who teaches resume writing and things like that is going to tell you something a little bit different. The biggest thing I can tell you is, again, contact information is generally wants to be at the top, maybe look a little bit different than the rest of your resume. I tend to do work experience first because what most companies have switched to, especially ones that get thousands and thousands of resumes, is they switch to software. And so a lot of times they're reading for certain keywords and certain formats, and that's going to help them filter out a lot of resumes. So I'll put work experience first, and what I'll try to do is I'll try to tailor the job posting to my resume. So if there's a lot of words in there like customer service or security like that, I'll make sure a lot of those words are incorporated into the resume so that it'll get picked up by the computer software, because most hiring managers or recruiting personnel aren't hand reading resumes anymore unless they're only getting maybe a handful of resumes at a time. Relevance, depending on how old you are, if you're 18 years old, you may have only one job or no work experience. If you're someone like me who's been doing this quite a while and has worked for quite a few different companies, I only tend to put the most relevant of jobs, unless for some reason they want you to go back a certain amount of time, like 5 or 10 years, then that may change the way it's formatted. But for the most part, if I'm applying for security jobs, I generally tend to only put security experience in there. I've worked other jobs that weren't in the security field, and I tend to not include those if I'm applying for security jobs. The next thing you're going to want to is any education or certifications. Those are going to tend to go at the bottom. If you have active certifications or things like that, security licenses, certifications in first aid, CPR, any other certifications, you're going to want to include those in the bottom as well. Education, obviously, if you have things like college degrees or even certain coursework in specific fields, you may want to include in there because it may pique the recruiter's eye or the hiring manager's eye. So including things like that in your resume is important. If they're not active or they've expired or whatever reason, that I generally wouldn't include those, because if you get asked about them, you're going to have to explain to them that, it's no longer an active certification. Another thing is, guys, is use, job websites and social media platforms. Indeed is a big one. Monster, jobbing, all of those. I have a resume on Indeed, with all of my current information, jobs, and stuff like that. And, I will get recruiting letters and things from different companies. And so it's a good way because it lets recruiters from a variety of different industries and even within the industry look at your resume, and a lot of times they can contact you directly. And if you get contacted directly, it makes the job process a little easier because you already know that this company has shown interest in you. So again, I would look at building your resume on Indeed or Monster. And then LinkedIn, guys. I think LinkedIn is probably one of the most underutilized social media platforms. If you guys don't know what LinkedIn is, it's pretty much like Facebook, but it's for professionals to network with other professionals in your industry or similar industries. And it's pretty much just like a Facebook page for your work experience. And so a lot of times with that, it's similar. You can put in resumes, certifications, special skills, all of those things into a social media page, and you can turn it on where recruiters can send you recruiting information, or you can connect with other people in your industry as well. And a lot of times it can lead to networking opportunities for better jobs. I can tell you a lot of the higher end security jobs and the more proprietary and higher end contract jobs tend to be through networking versus direct application. A lot of companies will make you still apply, but a lot of these are word of mouth jobs where you know someone in the industry, you've connected someone in that network, and a lot of times they'll let you know ahead of time, hey, this job's going to be posted or whatever like that. It kind of gives you a little edge when you're connecting with other people in the industry. Also, one of these big things I've learned and things that I would definitely include is accomplishments. So most resumes are going to entail what you did, what your job responsibilities were at the company, security jobs, whether it's access control, patrolling, anything you necessarily did for the security company, you're going to want to put in there, but also any accomplishments that you did while you were working for the company. One of mine is I used to be a trainer for new people, pretty much a field trainer, where new guys would shadow me and I would kind of show them the ins and outs of the job. We did have a training period and also a probation period. I trained roughly about 15 guys at my last job, and 14 of them completed their training, probation, and went on to become a full-time. I don't want to say full-time, but they became they're pretty much not probationers, probation anymore. And so I put that as an accomplishment. Or if you've spearheaded certain types of security initiatives or programs or things that you've done to pretty much help the department or show that you're innovative or have incorporated new policies or procedures in the department, you're going to want to include those because it's going to show other jobs that you're a go-getter, you're innovative, you're initiator, and that you can be tasked with doing new things. And again, a lot of companies want that. So we're going to kind of move away from resumes, and we're going to go into more of the interview process. Again, some of these are going to be very general. Others may get a little more specific. Dress for the interview, guys. You don't have to, for the most part, wear a three-piece suit. A lot of times business casual is where most interviews are at. So, a polo, some slacks, a belt, maybe some nice dress shoes, and a lot of times you're gonna be good to go. Most places aren't expecting you to show up in a full suit and tie gig for the most part, unless you're interviewing for maybe some high-level director, VP, type job, then that would probably be more appropriate. But for, maybe entry level or even some of these higher end jobs, business casual is going to be more the way to go. So just make sure it's clean. Again, polo shirts or even a nice button up would probably be appropriate in most cases, unless specifically the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever you're interviewing with tells you it's business professional. But for the most part, again, stick with business casual. Bring copies of your resume, especially if you've made changes. But you're going to bring an updated resume to the interview if some things have changed. Again, maybe when you applied for a job, your certifications were up to date, and maybe you lost a cert or two or a licensure or two. And so just make sure your resume reflects that, because they may already have a copy of your resume or they may not. And it's nice to have multiple copies, because sometimes going into interviews, you may not know if you're speaking to a single person or if maybe doing a panel interview. And so it's good to have a couple copies in case someone doesn't have one, or they may not have any at all. The next thing I'm going to tell you is, and this is more general, it's just know about the company a little bit. You don't have to know everything, but knowing, what they do is, if it's a proprietary, because they may It may be a security department that's in-house for a hospital or corporation or whatever, and knowing about the organization itself tends to make it look like you're capable of doing research and that you have some enthusiasm for working there. With contract security companies, you tend to know they provide security services. So I mean, it's good to know about the company, but it's not adamant because it's usually pretty clear. Be upfront, guys, about your goals and intentions, and about some other things. I recently, at this interview for my current job, they asked me if I had any legal problems that would cause any issues, and that pretty much came to mean that if I'd ever been convicted of a crime, including any misdemeanors, that I wasn't eligible for the job. A lot of times, if it's just a resume-based system, they may not know that right up front. And so it's good to be upfront about it if you have any type of legal problems or any problems in your past that may come back to make the company look bad or you look bad. And so it's best to be upfront about that. Some companies are willing to overlook it, especially if you're honest about it. But other companies, it may just be a no-go, and it's not good to waste your time or their time on something that's realistically might not happen. The same way with goals or intentions. Some companies are looking for longevity. They may be looking for people that are going to stay 4, 5, 6, 10 years or whatever. If that's what your intentions are and you're legitimately serious about that, it's good to let them know that, because that shows that you might be a right fit for the company. If you have other aspirations, or maybe you're working on an education towards a different career field, or looking to go do something else, it's also good to be upfront, specifically if they ask you. At my last job, they told me they were looking for someone who's going to be around five or more years. They asked me if that was what I was looking for. I told them it's a possibility, but that I had other goals and aspirations that I had thought about obtaining, and I was upfront about it, and they still hired me. So it's not a bad thing to be upfront and honest when conducting an interview. If guys, again, this is going to be more of a general one. If you have problems in interviews, where you have problems communicating with people, maybe you're not the best interviewer or talker, or things like that, it's good to practice. It's good to have someone trust, and kind of maybe look up mock questions, or even take questions you've been asked in previous interviews and have someone kind of run through you, so you have kind of your bearing and your feet underneath you when it comes to responding to interview questions. The last thing you kind of want to do is stammer and stutter, or have to take really, really long pauses to think of answers to questions. There's nothing wrong with taking a second or two, especially with guys that have been in the industry a while, when they ask you name a time type questions. Some guys have had that scenario run through their work experience, dozens of times, and so it's kind of hard to think of just one. But kind of have some ideas in minds of some incidents or stories, or things like that you can talk about in the interview. So again, just practice, guys. It's gonna benefit you a lot more, and it makes you look more professional, coherent, when you can kind of come up with the answers pretty quickly. And some of these are look at the person who's talking to you. So if it's a panel, one person asks you a question, you want to look at that person when you're giving an answer. Same way across the board. If it's just a one-on-one interview, it's a little more simple. And then so that's kind of all in for interviews and the do's. We're gonna get into a few don'ts, guys, and things that you probably don't want to do during interviews or even on the resume. Obviously, the big one is don't lie. If you've never done a particular job before, or you've never or you're maybe not as proficient in some type of activity or software program or whatever, don't pretend like you do, because you don't want to end up getting the job and they expect you to know these things already, and then when you get hired that you don't know. Or if they check to check your experience, or check your certifications, or check any of that stuff, and it comes out that you lied or heavily embellished, then that's going to look real bad on you, and realistically you're probably not going to get the job. So there's nothing wrong with maybe fluffing up your resume a little bit. I know with a lot of security jobs it's not the most glamorous, and it's very hard to make sound interesting, but there's ways of doing it without heavily embellish or just outright lying on your resumes. I would avoid, and I wouldn't say this is a hard don't, but I would avoid asking about pay and benefits right off the bat. Most of the time that stuff's going to be discussed if they decide to give you a conditional offer of hire. So they're going to discuss how much they want to pay and some of the benefits. If the person interviewing you kind of asks you, hey, did they tell you about the benefits here? There's nothing wrong with saying no, they didn't, and they'll probably go and explain a lot of them to you. So just be wary of that. So again, I wouldn't. It's not a hard don't, and I don't think there's anything wrong so much with asking about benefits and pay, but I would kind of avoid it, especially during the interview process. When you get closer to possibly are they looking at hiring you, then that's a lot of times questions you're going to start asking. And then this is a one that kind of happened to me once, and it's more of it should be common sense, but I've seen it happen a couple times. I've had people come to armed guard interviews with their gun on their hip. Don't do that. It makes you look kind of like a psychopath and like a cowboy, and like you're looking to kind of shoot somebody with it. And so I would avoid doing that. I don't know what it is with the guys and bringing their guns on their hips to interviews for armed guard positions. Again, it looks just really unprofessional, and I mean it's common sense, but I have had it happen more than once, and so I would I just wanted to throw it in there. And then also don't brag. There's nothing wrong with selling yourself and kind of showing why you're the right person for the job and why you're the right hire for the job, but I definitely would avoid bragging about yourself and boasting and talking about how awesome you are, because it's going to kind of put people off, because they're going to kind of see you as someone who's very self-absorbed and kind of a tool, and why you may have been a very good candidate for the job, when you're off-putting to the management and possibly your coworkers, it makes it a lot harder in the manager's mind to kind of justify hiring you when you may be proficient at the job, but you may not mesh well with the company itself. So avoid bragging or boasting or anything like that. That's all I really have for you today, guys. Again, a lot of these are very general, but security interviews tend to be very similar, and I've noticed a lot of people asking about tips when it comes to the interview process and things like that. I hope this helped people, and I hope that you take some of the things that I've kind of talked about today, and hopefully maybe incorporate them and make you a better interviewer and make you a better resume writer, and maybe land that job that you wanted, or that higher paying job, or whatever you're kind of seeking aspiration wise, either in the security industry or outside that. So thanks for listening, guys. Again, I've very happy to hit the 500 subscriber mark and still counting. Thank you for all the support, guys. And again, as mentioned before, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, the notification icon, and if you don't already, follow me on Instagram and Facebook.